From H&M to clicks and resume, advertising has a lot of messaging that many perceive as racist or tone deaf. What causes it and how can it be resolved? The circulation of newspapers has been dropping significantly in the last year. Should we be alarmed and our audiences finally paying for online publications? Hello and welcome to Media and Society on SABC News, independent and impartial. My name is Rems Mabote. This is where we look at the intersection between media and audiences. This show is not complete without your say. Connect with us via our social media channels and share your views and concerns about how the media works and what we feed you. Hashtag SABC Media and Society and call us on 011-714-6841 or 42. H&M was once asked to explain their lack of black models on posters in a Cape Town store. The store responded on Twitter by saying they're trying to show a positive image of the brand. South Africans were angered by this. Then a few years later, they returned with a black boy wearing the coolest monkey in the jungle t-shirt. Even though cleared of racism now, clicks and resume also angered many South Africans with their hair campaign once. Let's take a look.
EFF's Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi says a steep penalty is necessary to discourage the publication of further tone-deaf and racist adverts. His party was largely vocal against the advertisement published by H&M and Clicks in 2018 and 2020 respectively. Clicks depicted the hair of a white woman as normal, while the hair of a black woman was depicted as dry and damaged. Clothing retailer H&M used a black child to model a sweatshirt sporting the phrase "coolest monkey in the jungle." Ndlozi says there has to be a visible change in the advertising world.
Transformation. We have raised this in Parliament. We've raised it with ICASA when it appears. It has been holding some never-ending inquiry into that entire scam of the masquerade regulations. They are the ones that did them. And my desire, our desire, was that once there is a resolution on the masquerade regulations, there should have been, MultiChoice must pay back the money. Retrospectively, they must pay back the money to the SABC for all the advertisement that they've stolen over the years, based on racism.
The Commission will spend the rest of the week exploring possible changes that can be looked at within the advertising space in South Africa. Abongile Tumako, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Please tell us.
In the past, some brands would first try to justify what many all over the world would see as racism, and then they would apologize later. To discuss this and whether the angry reaction by the consumer, that is you, is justified, is Pritish Suraj. He is CEO of the Loris, which are the biggest marketing and advertising awards in Africa and in the Middle East. Pritish is joined by advertising executive and South Africa's promising managing partner, Phumi Mashego. Be part of this conversation by asking questions to our guests or sharing your views on today's topic by calling us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. You can also be part of the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag SABC Media and Society. Pritish, is this necessary? Is this conversation necessary? Are we overreacting?
No,
Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. No, I don't think the conversation is unnecessary. I think it's very necessary. We need to continuously have these discussions and hold the industry to account. What I believe is we need to continuously test the industry. And if the industry is in the right, it'll come out as the right. If it's in the wrong, it'll come out as the wrong. And then we find solutions and move on. So yes, these are very important to continue these conversations.
We mentioned two examples here. And one could say, if it's two examples, we probably are nitpicking.
Well, you know, when I look at it, and as the Louis said, we look at the whole Africa and Middle East, but even just focusing on South Africa, when we look at it, there are thousands, tens of thousands of pieces of advertising communication produced every single year. And if you had to actually look at it and look at the ones that have come across and have raised the eye of society, you've had the Clicks example, which the equality, and that was in 2020. Let's look at the whole of last year. In the whole of 2021, there wasn't a single example of any advertising that anyone looked at and said, this is racist and this makes me feel uncomfortable, and that has been raised anywhere. In 2020, we had the Clicks example, which the Equality Carter said that came from consumers cropping it. So somebody went and cropped the ad and created the wrong perception of the entire communication, but still, it needed to be raised and gotten to this point. And prior to that, the last time there was any example of any communication that raised the eye of society was where it came from the advertising industry, was in 2018, where there was an example of an ad that was accused of colonialism. Obviously, the H&M example, that's a retailer, and also it kind of muddies the waters when you look at a retailer versus the advertising industry versus some of the other brands that are out there. These are different dynamics, and therefore, in terms of just being clear as the advertising industry, you can see there's mechanisms in place to deal with it when it does happen. But obviously, the retail example is very different. That needs to go through a retail channel.
Phumi, hello. Is this a human issue or an industry issue? You know, sometimes things go wrong. If things went wrong on this show, sometimes it's a Rams matter, not an SABC matter.
You know, Rams, I think the conversation around racism in South African advertising, but also it's a conversation that happens all over the world. It's a historical problem that we have had. And I do think that as important as the conversation is, it's a little bit late. I think in the advertising industry, in the time that I've been in the industry, I've seen huge leaps and bounds in terms of changes. We have marketing executives that are Black. We have executive creative directors that are Black. We have diversity across the board. And I just think that what we're looking at is we're kind of looking at something and trying to fix an old thing, whereas we should be looking at what goes on in the future. You know, I was looking at your Twitter feed. You've got 30,000 people that follow you on Twitter. That is more than the circulation of some of the mainstream newspapers, right? So in terms of who is in charge of the communication and who it goes to, it's completely changed. And you are in charge of creating your own content for your own people. And that content, because you are Rams, is going to be resonating with Rams. It's going to resonate with the people that follow you. And that's the landscape that we're at, right? So as advertising changes, we should be looking at where is advertising going and how do we participate more in that?
Then I have to go to the issue of the regulatory board. And I hear the example you make about me, and 30,000 is not even a number. What is their role in cases like this? Could they volunteer to deal with something before the public complain?
I don't know if they could volunteer to deal with it before the public complains, because again, the landscape is so different. You know, right now, and Pritesh will baby out on this, the advertisers that make the most money are Facebook and Google, right? To a lesser extent is Twitter and LinkedIn and those places. Those are the guys. George Soros calls it the duopoly of advertising, right? That's where the money is going. And what those two companies have done is they've put a lot of emphasis on the entrepreneur. So individual people are now the owners of media. How do you police 30,000, 500,000, 1 million content creators as they are creating content for themselves? Then
the question is, is the industry supposed to police itself? Because for me, self-regulation is a great thing, but there are slip-ups. The examples I gave you are proof of that. Somebody must look at that. Somebody must be always sitting there as big brother, big sister, maybe. We never use that phrase. And saying, you're wrong there, correct this.
So let me ask it in a different way for you, Rams. So when you have a content creator who's a Mihlali, for instance, and all the people that follow Mihlali are interested in what she says and the things that she says. And we know that the way that the internet works is it works with algorithms, right?
Yep.
So the algorithms serve you more of what you look for. And they are, as we know, all over the world, raging right-wingers who have some views that we're kind of like, you know, and they are far left who also have views that are too far out. How do you police all those intermediaries in between. And that's what people are looking for. People are now in charge of what they see and what they are fed, and the algorithms just reinforce those biases that they have. You know, SABC,
You sound like you're
instance,
saying to me we should live with it. Like,
no, I don't think we
like
should live
grow
with
up,
it.
guys.
I do think that we must understand that we are now looking, especially when I looked at what the Commission was trying to do, is it felt for me like we're looking backwards instead of looking forward into the future. History is great. History is great, right? But we should be looking at the future, where the future is going, and how do we mitigate in those instances, right?
I'm glad you've mentioned the Commission, Pritesh, because I was going to ask, if I had them here, what's the end game? What's the point of this hearing? What are we trying to get at the end of it? And I don't want you to answer for them, but I want you to tell me what you think.
So I'm the answer for myself. I'm not too sure, and I'll tell you why. Because there are systems and processes in place that are happening in from a governmental level. If you look at it this Friday that's coming up, the MAC Charter Council is being launched. So the Minister and the Presidency, we're all going to Pretoria. I sit on that. We're going to launch to try and better improve any of the outages that we see in the industry itself. And there wasn't enough awareness in terms of this commission actually happening. So I'm not really too sure what the end game is. I do think it was potentially just trying to get a feel and understanding of the industry. And one of the ways that would have happened better is to actually go into the industry, go into the brands, the agencies, meet some of the people that are out there, get to know who's actually creating the work. And I think you'd have a very different experience if your feet were on the ground in the space where the work is being created, rather than in a hotel and asking a few people to come to you and have a look at it. So I'm really not too sure. That's just my opinion, as I said.
And that's why you're here, for your opinion.
The commission really felt like grandstanding for me. So the parts that I did see, and I did spend quite a lot of time kind of looking at it, it was a lot of grandstanding. Like, let's be honest, advertising, marketing is a sexy business. Everybody wants to be in some way in the business, associated with the business. And this was just another example. You talk about the parliamentary committee. I mean, there's a parliamentary committee for communication, and the ad industry has been very active for many, many years, kind of working with that committee to make sure that we've got a charter in our industry, we've got BEE codes in our industry, and all of those things have been in consultation with the relevant regulatory bodies and parliamentary bodies and governing bodies. And it just, this for me felt a little bit like, oh, here's something that is quite exciting that we can talk to. Pritesh talks about, like, we didn't know the terms of reference. Almost everybody I spoke to who's in an ad agency or who's a marketer only saw the terms of reference on the Monday that the commission was starting.
Absolutely. That's correct. When I got sent it on
so
that
we were
Monday.
spoiled for choice when we had to find guests, and especially like black guests. The marketing industry has transformed. You've said so. I mean, you guys are top marketing executives. It's great. Why would these slip-ups happen? I would think that in the value chain, there is so many of you guys that we shouldn't be having even the smallest of the slip-ups, whether it's retail or...
So let's have a look at it. The clicks example, the Equality Court found that was not racist. The Equality Court. And if you look at the ruling and if you go through it and delve into it, and I've breezed through it as well, you'll see that the biggest issue that came from that was that the original piece of communication was cropped, and then it was sent out with basically a misrepresentation of what was trying to be done. That was the first part. And that's why the Equality Court, when it applied its mind to it, said it wasn't. In other examples, I mean, the only other example I told you in 2018 was the ad. And that is still one that's debated by some people in the industry who are black, who go, like, they don't believe that example was truly an example of racist advertising, and it was just erring on the side of extreme caution in terms of sanctioning that ad itself. So I genuinely absolutely believe that the transformation has happened in the industry, but it's not just me. If you look at the Institute for Race Relations, when they went to the commission and they testified, in their testimony, what they said was that the industry is transformed, and that if you look at it, that they've taken out race. That's not my words. Institute of Race Relations said that racism has been taken out of advertising. So the examples you're saying, as that's a retailer.
Let me take a break, because I want to deal with this Equality Court matter.
Okay.
I'm worried about it. So after the break, we continue this conversation with my guest. Remember, you can be part of this conversation. Ask questions, give us your views, call us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society with me, Rams Mabote, who sat on the microphone and you could not hear me. I apologize for that. Be part of this conversation by calling us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. Share your views or hashtag Media and Society on Twitter. I'm still with Pritesh Suraj, CEO of the Luris and Advertising Executive, Phumi Mashego. But I'm going to go to the calls first. Kondile is calling us from Mangaung. As usual, Kondile, good morning and thank you very much for being part of this show.
Morning, Rams.
Yes, sir.
Rams, the industry is dynamic. And whilst we are focusing on the complexion, black or white, it's now moving to another space. I think the guest, captured it right, that look at LinkedIn, look at Facebook. I don't know, we don't have a space there as Africans. I think it's high time that as Africans we regulate the space, because platforms like your Facebook, like your LinkedIn and so cannot, get a lecture in this space. We need us as Africans, as Africa as a continent, to regulate that space, because that is where the money is going to in terms of advertising and so on. So something has to be done. The government, the government structures in Africa must intervene, because this is the main opportunity, business opportunity for Africans and for the youth and women.
Kondile, is that something not us creating our own? Why is something the regulation only? When are we going to create our own LinkedIn, our own Twitter, our own Facebook, and play in that space ourselves, and not be then complaining about outsiders taking our pie here?
You're right. We need to create our own, but also, if we leave these pilot projects to do as they wish in the continent, it becomes problematic. They must create a space for us so that we can do our own things.
Okay.
And I do not understand the figure that Nkosi was putting there. I can't justify it. I would need him to really expand on it, because here we need to deal with real practical things, not just making comments and leave it as it is.
Okay, let me run, Kondile. Thank you very much for the call. Nhlakanipho from Soweto. Good morning. We just lost Nhlakanipho. I hope you come back, mate. We'd like to hear your views. I think I dealt with Kondile. I want to go to something, Pritesh. And it may sound vain, maybe even banal, but what goes on in the day of a marketer when a campaign is conceived and this young upstart called Rams comes in with an amazing thing that he conceived? What goes on until it comes out into public, until we view it, we read it, or whatever? What happens?
Obviously,
briefly.
Very brief. I'll give you the brief set. It actually starts before. It starts at the brand. So the brand goes and briefs an agency, and the brand says, "This is what I'm trying to achieve with my brand. This is what I want to do." It goes to the agency, who then think about it and interrogate it and find ways that they can actually do it. And then there's a back and forth between the brand and the agency, presenting ideas. The brand goes, maybe no, maybe we want to change some things. And there's this back and forth that ultimately goes between two before they both come to this happy medium that says, this is what we want to create. And then that passes on to the production companies, who then create that piece of content. And then that's handed over to broadcasters such as this, who then put it on air. That's just a snapshot in terms of what happens. But what's really important, the focus is the back and forth. There's a lot of interrogation, a lot of thinking, and a lot of work that goes into crafting that idea and coming up with it. So it's not just a thumbs up really quick, let's rush it through. Nothing is ever rushed through.
As a senior priest, very senior priest in the Catholic Church once said, Christians created God in their own image, not the other way around. Have marketers created audiences that they want instead of knowing who the audience is?
You know, it actually works both ways. You've heard does art imitate life or does life imitate art, which is similar to what the priest is saying. And the thing about marketing and communication is it's got to be provocative, it's got to get you thinking, but it's also got to, it's unlike just plain art, it's got to get you to buy the product. So it's very important for a marketer to understand their audience, understand who you are talking to, and audiences, once again, you know, in South Africa, we used to have something called LSMs, which came from a very old concept with black, white, Indian, colored, you know, what do you have, what do you not have? And all of that has changed. We've changed from looking at demographics, so are you a woman, are you old, are you young? To a place where we're now looking at psychographics, right? Because you and I, Rams, could like the same type of cars. And in terms of demographics, we're very different, except for the fact that we're both black, we're very different. You know, if you think about the things that we like on TV, who watches what, all of those things are very important to a marketer to make sure that whatever communication they put out. So what Pratesh didn't tell you about is that there's strategy. There's a lot of thinking that goes into what you put out. You're not just kind of coming up with a cute or cool idea. You're coming up with an idea that will convert people into buying your product.
Well, Nhlakanipho is back with us from Soweto. Good morning, mate.
Yes. Good morning, how are you doing?
I'm dark and lovely, thank you. How are you?
Yes, I'm also dark and lovely. I'm also
Great.
dark and lovely. Greetings to the guest and the host. I have just a quick question. What does the issue of racism in advertising put us as black people having to play part and dominate in the marketing agency? Because, I mean, if I were to offend a Muslim, it's because I wouldn't know about the culture and also the dynamic of a Muslim. Hence, it would be coming from a black person who I was supposed to say is ignorant with how then to approach a Muslim with regard to culture and also the dynamics. So with me being offended by these companies, by these Israelis, I think it comes from a place where we also let play part in the marketing agency, which goes to show that still the equality is ridiculous when it comes to black people being in position to executive positions as far as the marketing agency is concerned.
You disagree. You said that much earlier in our conversation.
We have incredible diversity within our industry. It has changed. There's still lots of work to be done, but there's also lots of voices. There are lots of voices in.
They have power. Maybe that's what Nhlakanipho was speaking about. Maybe you guys sit in there, but maybe you're not at the end of the table. You're not at the top of the table.
No, that's not a problem that we have in the business. We have, and again, I will say to you, if you look across the board at all the big companies, whether it's the banks, financial institutions, all of those people have black marketers. The CMO is a black person. The CMO at Momentum is a black person. The CMO at Standard Bank is a black person. All of those people are black. So, and that is the final decision maker, is the CMO of on the client side. We have executive creative directors in most of our ad agencies, and creative directors, and junior staff, and strategists, and so that is not the problem. The voice is there, the diversity is there.
Okay, I'm going to take another call.
With that. Yeah.
I'm going to take and I'll come back to you. Tebet from Johannesburg. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Yes, sir. We're all ears.
Yeah, I say I don't see anything wrong with the advert, because the people who buy the items, they are above 18. So it's somebody's choice to decide either to buy or to not buy. And another thing is that as an African, also the way I said before, we should learn also to manufacture our own things and not copy. So if the other people come with an idea, why should we blame that idea that they have? We must learn to do our own things. If we see something is not right, we must not buy it, then it will go out of market. They are not in time demonstrating, doing all these other things.
Thank you, Krevet. But I think he's ignoring. I mean, yes, I'm 18 when I'm over 18 when I make choices. But what is on television and everywhere else? My daughter, who's 13, also gets to see this. You know, she gets to be influenced by content that she sees. We can't be reductive and say, Rams is an adult. He makes his own choices.
Rams, I have a question. How much TV does your daughter watch? Or does she spend most of her time on her devices, on the internet, and on YouTube? And this is the point that Or TikTok, and this is the point that I'm making. In those environments, right, the people who make the advertising money are the big guys. Google, YouTube.
But they still have a responsibility to not send imagery that is not...
But what they don't do, what Facebook does not do, what YouTube does not do, is they do not create content. They are individuals who are all creating content, even on TikTok. I mean, if you look at South African TikTok and the amount of creativity that goes into South African TikTok, those people are creating their own stuff, and those are individuals. And where do you limit the individuals?
I'm out of time. I need to ask you this question very, very quickly. It's very important to me. Could there be a need for the industry to once in a while engage publics and talk to us about how things work?
Well, yeah, I think maybe it's what they call piercing a veil. And I think one of the things is we need the public to obviously also pay more attention. The industry is very outward facing. I'm going out, I'm speaking to schools. We've got people going across the continent, actually speaking to different people. And what we'd love is pay more attention, understand how it works. We want more people from society to come to it. Get your children involved, get them into the industry. And the only way we can do it is figure out how it works. Go onto the websites of the big agencies, figure out how things work in this industry, and figure out how you can play a part in it.
And if all else fails, we will interrogate it here. Thank you very much, Professor Suraj, CEO of the Luris, and Phumi Mashego. Thank you very much for your time here. After the break, we will chat about dropping newspaper circulation and ask where the readers are going, if anywhere at all. You can be part of the conversation by asking questions to our guests and sharing your views on today's topic by calling us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. Or also be part of the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag SABC Media and Society. Welcome back. You're still on Media and Society with me, Rems Mavote. This conversation on media is about you. Please share your views on today's topic by calling us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. You can also be part of the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag SABC Media and Society. The State of the Newsroom report shows an industry that is struggling with consumers now choosing new digital ways to access the news. For the last decade, there's been growing evidence that news consumers are moving away from physical hard copy print publications. We went out to find out if some of you still read hard copy newspapers. Check this out.
Well, I watch and read news online because it is so convenient. I mean, we are in that era of the fourth industrial revolution. So everything is going digital, and it's so convenient for us because the news are accessible to me anytime, readable anywhere, and the news are constantly updated. So it's such a great convenience. And the news are free, hey? You don't have to pay a dime. So I believe that online is the way.
So I read online. I don't buy newspaper at all. And I would say that I do pay for my data, for my news, which I read online, in the form of buying data.
I don't read newspapers anymore. I read news online. And yes, I do buy data to read news. So I do pay for reading news online.
Don't buy newspapers anymore. I catch up on news online. And yes, I have subscribed to an online newspaper.
Joining me to have a conversation about audiences that are moving away from print is News 24 Managing Editor Mpho Raburifi and State of the Newsroom Report Editor Alan Finlay. Good morning to both of you, and thank you very much for joining us. Mpho, is it a surprise that audiences are moving or actually have already moved away from print?
No, it's not a surprise at all, Rams, unfortunately. And I was listening to your voice box pops of the people that you guys interviewed. And it's actually heartbreaking to think that we all grew up with that the tradition of buying it every Sunday morning and sitting around the table and, everybody getting a piece of the paper and just going through it. And now that's just a culture and tradition that's just eroding year by year, which is very, very sad to hear.
Why is it happening, in your view? What have you found out as News 24? I mean, you actually the biggest online publication, if I'm right.
Yes, we are. So, Rams, I think most of the people that you guys interviewed spoke to it. The culture right now is a digital one. Everybody's got a smartphone in their hand. if you think about it, we don't go to Musica anymore to buy an album that we like. We go to Spotify or Tidal, or we find it on YouTube. So the behavior, the user behavior of buying things in a tangible format doesn't exist anymore, or is eroding. Let me not say it doesn't exist, because we're still in a developing country. And so some things are going to take a bit longer than they are in the first world. But it's just a culture now to read digitally, and to also, people are merging social media with news sites, because everything is just found on the same platform, which is in the palm of their hands. So it's becoming more and more of a, it's a user behavior that they don't even have to think twice about. You know, where WhatsApp is, where their alarms are, where their friends are, is also the place where they find their news. So that's just something that's been happening year on year. And unfortunately, it's eating away at the traditional and legacy tradition that the media industry started out in.
Alan, the Wits Journalism State of the Newsroom report says that COVID-19 pandemic also changed how audiences engage with journalism. How is it changed it?
Well, it's a bit early to sort of say in a longitudinal way to what extent it changed it. But of course, we saw the circulation in newspapers plummeting even further. I mean, they were on a downward trend for at least the last 10 years or 5, 6, 7 years. But they completely bottomed out. Some of them lost circulations of up to 47%, which is almost half of their circulation. So newspapers definitely have gone down in circulation, whereas internet, as Paul suggested, you suggested, greatly benefited from the pandemic. In fact, News 24 was the news site that managed to capitalize on the increased need and thirst and repeated need for news on COVID-19 in particular. And in fact, they should be lauded for what they did, because I really think they pulled something off in difficult times. TV also spiked during the pandemic, particularly in the first month after lockdown. There were increases of 40%, 60% of TV news programs. On the isiZulu, isiXhosa stations, and even the free-to-air English news programs, which that's quite something, because they've been going down, their trend has been going downwards too, losing audience on the free-to-air channels I'm talking about, the top news programs. So, but they again returned, TV, those news programs returned on the downward trend. So it's really internet news that's benefited mostly. We can't quite tell what happened with radio, because Rams couldn't, the other Rams couldn't do their survey because of COVID. So as we said at the moment, internet really is the medium that's benefited the most.
That was a great reminder that I was indeed named for the industry. Alan, is the print industry managing to respond adequately to this change?
Look, it's strange, because you got the Daily Maverick launching its print version it has to be said, with a circulation deal with Pick and Pay, which was incredibly bold, right? So some people sort of think no. We need to understand it better, because there are major losses, but losses where? It's always been a case, for instance, that the Afrikaans newspapers have had less of a loss and are a lot more resilient than many of the English language newspapers in particular. So they might reach a base, newspapers, that you have a loyal audience that likes their newspapers. And we also need to remember that the people who access online news tend to be middle class, tend to be people who have smartphones, and that's not the majority of people. So the circulation of newspapers at the local level, which is the great tragedy of the pandemic, by the way, is that how it affected local newspapers in town. And at least 10 shut down or stopped printing for some reason of local newspapers, and that's terrible for local accountability. But the circulation of local newspapers in Shebeens, in the townships, what exactly is that? Because those are people who can't afford data every day to access online news.
Since the advent of the internet, the prediction that the newspaper is going to die has been around with us for a very long time. Did the industry prepare itself for this moment?
Ram, so when News 24 was born, it was in 1998, so shortly after we had our own burst of internet in our country. And I think the growth speaks for itself. We're about 23 years old, and we recently just launched our paywall now, a year ago. I think the newspapers that are surviving are the ones who weren't resistant to seeing the wave that was coming. And the ones that we see as struggling are the ones who played it out, stretched it out for as long as possible. And I think that's what's evident that we're seeing in our industry. The ones who embraced it earlier on, tried to get their digital online sites running. There's always, I'm sure you will both know that there's always that tension inside a newsroom of the legacy people and the new people, and the young people seeing as the digital ones who want to be experimental and push boundaries. And then you've got the people who've always done things a certain way and want to keep it a certain way because it speaks to the brand of the title. So people who didn't embrace the newness of digital and being not being possessive about the content that they put up, and coming to a place where they could agree that, okay, some of it is going to go on our site, some of it is going to go on our print publication, and we have to start finessing how we stretch that muscle on a day-to-day basis as a newsroom. Those are the people that have managed to keep afloat during this time. And the people that have crumbled are, unfortunately, the people who held on to the past for too long, because that started, making them sink into the bottom of the ocean, which is where we're finding a lot of publications now. I mean, I think it's really sad that in our year and a half of launching our paywall, we've managed to reach a number of subscriptions who are, if not level, just above what some of our country's most successful print publications do on an annual basis in terms of circulation. That's heartbreaking.
A radio station many years ago, Mpo, had a very funky and I think tongue-in-cheek ad that said, if you miss the news now, the print will repeat it tomorrow. There has to be a positive. Now that you've gone online, you now can take them, take us by the minute, every minute, the broadcasters. There should be a positive.
It is. It should be. I think what our readership, what our consumers should view us as being spoiled for choice. So the fact that I have the option of going to SABC or IOL or Business Tech or News 24 or Mail and Guardian, because I can find them all on the same platform and I can hear what I want to hear in the voice that I would like to hear it on, is a plus for any consumer. So we should be trying to push for more and more people to be on across all of the platforms. Alan spoke to Daily Maverick launching their paper subscription, which is something, we all found a bit, okay, so they're trying to have a print publication when everybody's trying to have a non-physical entity. So I think as long as there's variety and diversity in terms of choice for the reader, they are the winners, because we don't want to get to a place where there's a monopoly in terms of storytelling and journalism. We all exist to speak to certain people, and that's important,
Well, we're going to take a break, but I want to talk to you, viewers. I hope you can call and tell us why you're not reading papers anymore. Are you on digital? Are you paying now? There are paywalls now. We all pay for this stuff. Are you in there? Is data affordable for you? So when we come back, we continue with Mpora Burifi and Alan Finlay. Stay right with us here. Only a few years ago, a newspaper like the Daily Sun had 500,000 or so buyers, readers on a daily basis. And today, that paper is gone. There has to be a reason why you have stopped buying your favorite newspaper. I'm not sure that all of us are on paywalls and reading there. So we continue our conversation on media and society with Alan Finlay, who is the newsroom report editor, and News 24 Managing Editor Mpora Burifi. Thank you very much for staying with us. Alan, I want to know, how should newsrooms rethink the way they speak to the clearly changing news consumer?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And I mean, I think you have to situate that question in what the media's role is in democracy. And in a country like South Africa, that the democracy we're trying to develop. And so it's about public interest, right? So the one big thing that newspapers that need to understand, that do understand, but that I think need to attend to, is what some people call about the invisibility of the South African narrative. Now, this includes issues like data, but stories too, right? Is that actually there's a large part of the country that we don't really understand in terms of the media, simply because they're not counted. They're not counted in a narrative way, they're not counted in a data way. And which is one of the issues we raised in State of the Newsroom, is that there's a very poor data culture in South Africa, that actually our data, our access to data, our production of data is not very robust. And it's not very robust at the community level. So I would say newspapers, mainstream newspapers, people like News 24, they need to go local as much as possible. They need to grow the local data and local data narrative. And I think that is going to feed into a much more robust democracy and a much more robust understanding of who we are as South Africans.
Mpo, one of the things I remember as a print journalist, as a young print journalist, that I had a relationship and a physical feel with the reader. I went out there, I did stories, I met human beings. Is online changing that? Are we now only in newsrooms and doing short journalism away from long journalism?
That's such a lovely question, Rams, because it speaks to literally where we are as a newsroom 23 years later. So obviously when we launched, we were an aggregator site, which meant we wanted to break news quickly. Wherever it comes from, we wanted to get it out so that our South African readership could see it on our site. Over time, we started creating our own content, getting our own journalists to tell the South African story, still breaking. And I'm sure you would have seen during the week that we recently changed our slogan to Trusted News First instead of Breaking News First. And so we're trying to keep abreast of breaking news, but also now wanting to take it a step further and be the trusted news source with something. So with the advent of the paywall, now I keep speaking about this because I want you to understand where we are as a newsroom. We've now taught ourselves in the past year and a half how to stretch two different muscles. We want to lead the pack in terms of breaking news, breaking accurate news, but we're also investing in taking a beat and reporting on slower, more in-depth news. We've bulked up our investigations departments, our legal writers, and there's the stuff that we put behind the paywall is traditionally the things you would have seen in a weekly, like a Sunday Times that would come out of a City Press, which is our sister publication. So we are trying to stretch both muscles, Rams, and be the best at both of them. But I don't think that one form of journalism is dying, so to speak, at the expense of another one thriving. And as News 24, we are, if I can say, we're investing very heavily in trying to make sure that we can give the readers both forms, because we understand the importance of the fact that in our industry, with the death of all these publications, there's a growing void that's being filled. And just like Alan said, especially in the smaller towns. And that's something that we grapple with as a newsroom all the time, because it's resource-based. We will try to, when there's a case like the Clave matter, we transport our own resources into that place to try to put a spotlight on what's happening. And unfortunately, it's always prompted by breaking news. It's not a consistent thing to say we've got a person based in, Kanana land or that. But we would like to ideally get to that place. And I think we've done a good thing in the past 2 years in bulking up our newsroom so that we have teams that deal with breaking and slow, in-depth, the harder, deeper stuff that needs, someone to sit on it and read through it. So yeah, that's how I would put it.
Okay. Let's go to the far, and I mean far East End in Boksburg. Harry is calling us from there. Good morning, Harry.
Morning, Rams. The point that I'm trying to make is for men unnecessary. I am not willing to pay for online subscription. Especially these days, you will find that you have got a monthly subscription of copyright for content. But at the same time, you are using your internet or your data to go online. So it's very easy to get that content from any other media.
And you haven't lost anything. You don't feel like you lost anything in that process, Harry?
No, I don't feel I've lost anything. It's just I feel like some media houses are selling those content, or they are restricting the man on the street get access to that information.
Okay, thank you very much for the call. Alan, in the mix of what we've been talking about, in that value chain, there's someone called a journalist, and they come from a training of some form or another. Should we change, or has the form of journalism that is being given, the training at least, has it changed? Are you seeing that we're getting into newsrooms, people who are trained for this new world?
I mean, you would have to ask Paul that about the journalists who come from universities and colleges and so on, what skills they have. But I mean, certainly most people in South Africa, most centers in South Africa are very aware of the multimedia environment and try to prepare their journalists for the environment. Even at WITS, there used to be the student newspaper is now it's an online publication and so on. But so I would say yes, there is not so much in many countries, other countries in Africa, but certainly in South Africa, there's a push towards digital in many of the training courses and university courses, yes.
Okay, I think then you have to answer for yourself, Paul. You're more in the industry, and if you can do it quickly for me, I'm 30 seconds to the end.
Okay, just before I answer it, I just want to speak to your caller who spoke about the man on the street. It's very important to know that 80% of our content on News 24 is still free, and only 20% of it is locked away. So we're not forgetting about you, sir. And then secondly, yes, every single person who comes into our newsroom is coming from a school, and most, like Alan said, of those schools are training their students to be agile. So that means to write for digital publication, but those skills that they're being taught come from a legacy of standard journalism 101, which is what all of us have been taught. Whether you worked in radio or in print or in digital or in TV broadcast, the basics are all the same, the fundamentals are all the same. All it means is that you've got extra technical skills, which have to do with live editing, writing quickly, and also just some video editing, sound editing as we're moving towards podcasting, and documentaries on News 24 as well. But everything is still journalism 101. The fundamentals will always be the same.
And part of journalism 101 is that I must finish when I'm told to do so. Thank you very much, Mpora Burifi, News 24 Managing Editor, and Alan Finlay, Editor of the State of the Newsroom Report. Most of all, thanks to all of you for watching and participating on Media and Society. From me, Rems Mabote, and the team, goodbye and God bless.